Okay, we're back in the Rabbeinu Yonah. We're on the seventh principle of Teshuva, which is Kniya, which is humbleness, humility. And we're in the middle of that one. And Rabbeinu Yonah says that there's many levels of humility. So I think it's good for us to start again from Chav Daled. We're in the middle of Chav Daled. We're on page 34 and 35. That's where we left off in the middle. And that's where we'll begin. And the general notion that if one is not humble, one is arrogant, one will continue to sin, and we'll see he will go into great detail in this principle. So he says, Vida, you should know, Kimalas Hachno Rabos. There's many levels of humility here. Kasher Yisbar B'Shari Anov B'Es Hashem, as I will explain in another place. And the highest level of humility that is required in order to be on the path of Teshuva is Shiagdil V'Yadir Avodas Hashem. A person should make great and adore and glorify the service of Hashem. And he shouldn't think he's great. He shouldn't take credit for what he's done. So, so this is based on the statement of Chazal where it says, if you've done a lot, Al tachzik tov alatzmecha, don't think you're great, ki lekach notzart, because that's what you were created for. And we talked about this at the end of the last class. But a person may think about Teshuva is presented with a whole new lifestyle, and he's doing all sorts of good things in his life. And quite often, the Baal Teshuva comes with the baggage that goes something like this. After he's done Teshuva, he says, well, since I never did a Torah lifestyle in the past, and I'm beginning to do it now, so there's always the danger of the Baal Teshuva thinking that I'm doing something that I really don't have to do. The proof is, because in the past I didn't do it either. In the past I didn't keep kosher. In the past I didn't keep Shabbos. In the past I didn't keep all these things. Or whatever the thing is he didn't keep. I never did it before. I lived before without doing those activities. And if I do it now, so the person figure, I'm doing extra. Right? So the Baal Teshuva could have an attitude that he's doing extra things and is being super good. And that's a very big danger. You understand? The guy, whatever, it could be the complete Baal Teshuva or the Baal Teshuva in a certain area. Right? So the person's a complete Baal Teshuva. Like he never had a Torah lifestyle. He says, no, look, I'm amazing. Now I lived before without a Torah lifestyle. Now I'm taking on a Torah lifestyle. I was able to live without it in the past. And now I'm doing more than I was doing in the past. And I'm a really swell guy. Or even if it was a frum person all his life, in a certain area he was weak in, and now he's stronger in that area. So he's going to think, I'm a great guy in that realm as well, for that as well. And that's why he's explaining why this idea of hachna, of humility, which is interesting, is coming after what we had before was busha, which was shame. You might have thought it should have come before. You have the humility, and from the humility comes the shame. So he's saying, no, you have to have the shame in order to stop these things and to disassociate yourself from these things. But now that you've disassociated yourself from these things, there could come a certain arrogance in your accepting a Torah lifestyle, because now you could think, well, I never did in the past, so I'm going beyond the call of duty as a human being. That's the trap that the Baal Teshuva can fall into. And just saying, wow, I'm a real great guy. And a certain arrogance can come to the Baal Teshuva. So Rabbi Yonah says that a Baal Teshuva must know that the fact that you are serving Hashem, you're not doing him any favors. And it's not something you should be expecting to get a medal for. It's a great thing to serve Hashem. and there's so much fulfillment in it, and there's so much satisfaction in serving Hashem, and you are the one who is benefiting from this. And it's an honor to you, as it were, that you have this opportunity, and you're so privileged and fortunate that you have now understood that you are serving Hashem, and you understand that this is the greatest thing a person could do for his own personal satisfaction. So once a person understands that the goodness of that service itself is the compelling factor to do that activity of avodas Hashem, right? So then once you understand it, then that's what he's saying in those words. To realize a person, he says, is that sheyagdil v'yadir avodas Hashem. He has to make great, and he has to glorify the fact that you have the opportunity to serve Hashem. Right? It's not like you did Hashem a favor. So rather than feeling that you are going way beyond the call of duty, you should feel the humility of having the opportunity to still be able to serve Hashem, and they have the privilege to serve Hashem. Okay, that's what he's saying. That's the Yagdil v'Yadir Avodas Hashem. To understand the beautiful dimensions that the worship of Hashem has contributed to your life. So once you see that, then it will be v'lo yachazik tova la'atzmo. Then the person will not take credit for what he has done. So don't hold yourself that you've done things way beyond the call of duty. Don't think that. No, this is so much what you really need. It's for your benefit to be able to do this. So you won't get this arrogant feeling that you're doing your service out of the sweetness of your heart. That's the point he's trying to make over here. That's a big trap that you have to be careful of over here. And he continues, and he says, Ki yiktan hakol be'enov, ki neged mashu chayav avodas Hashem. Because everything he does, he will make it look small in comparison to what he is obliged to do in the service of Hashem. The other problem of taking credit for what you're doing is that it blinds the person as to how much he's done. Even if the person does accomplish a certain degree, and he feels good about it, but there's so much more that is yet available for the person to grow. The person says, I'm really good, so I don't have to improve anymore. No, that's also not good. If a person pats himself on the back, that usually will hamper his desire to want to go any further in life. So as good as you feel for what you've done, you should know it's a constant process that's required. Now, again, a person is entitled to feel good. I'm not saying you shouldn't feel good. You've accomplished a certain level of avodas Hashem. But once you start patting yourself on the back, and once you want to start taking credit for things, then that's a very big trap. It's a very big trap, because you're going to think, okay, I don't have to improve anymore. I've done what I have to do. I'm amazing. And that's not possible. There's so much more that's required that a person may not realize, but you've got to continue. Al-Kain, therefore, yikona v'yavod b'hatznea. Therefore, you should be humble, and you should serve Hashem discreetly. V'lo yachmod kavod al masav anechbadim. And you should not be searching for honor for your honorable activities that you've done. And you shouldn't look for glory for your glorious activities. And you'll try to conceal them from other people to the degree that is possible. Why should you do that? Isn't that a good thing, that other people should see that you're doing mitzvahs? Isn't that a good thing? But the truth is, we shouldn't run after people realizing what we're doing. And that's another trap. Sometimes people, once they're starting to do certain mitzvahs, they have to let the whole world know that they're doing it. right? Because you want people to honor you and recognize you and all these things. Now, on the one hand, it is good for other people to know. Larry, you saw that email I forwarded to you yesterday? It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. You don't know how many people are responding to that drush about the ability for one to keep Shabbos under difficult circumstances. So this one came from a frum person who said that they were starting to fall off the edge in Torah observance. I don't even know who the person is. I don't know who the person is. The email was forwarded to me, and I'm trying to figure out who this person is. First, we try to find out if they bought a ticket for the high holidays.
And fight for it.
They're probably going under another name or something, whatever. Wow. I'm just saying. I'm joking. But the person said, they had an issue of they had getting a new job somewhere. It's in sales, and it's important to make a sale very quickly. And there was the hot lead or whatever you call it was said, let's really talk about this much more seriously. I'd like to meet with you Friday night. And the person was on the edge, and after they heard the drush, and they figured if what they heard what was capable of being done, that they can at least give that up. So they gave that up. So you see, we're getting this is only from what people are telling us. So there is a merit to tell people about it. You see, but the merit is when Larry didn't want me to tell it, but I said you have to say it. That's different than Larry coming up to me and say, I think you should tell the whole world my story. You're not doing that. But if I'm saying you should tell the world, then that's a different story. What he's saying is, okay, there is a certain value of people knowing about this, but you shouldn't be showing it off, right? Because that's a trap, right? That the fact that people will give us such a claim and then will praise us so much for what we've done, that in our own minds we can start to think that I really didn't have to do it. And I'm being praised for that reason, for the graciousness of what I've done. So it's part of that trap again. So again, you have to go on a narrow bridge on this. On the one hand, there is an aspect for people to know about it, because the more that other people know that there are other Jews observing it will strengthen other Jews. That's important. It's important. So, for example, when we put up this facility, I was very particular that people who gave money to a certain level should be noted, because people have to know there are people giving, and if there's people giving, you can give also. If you don't put down anybody giving, then people say, nobody's giving. Why should I give? So you have to see plaques all around. They see there's plaques. They see there's people giving, and if that will encourage other people to give, that's a good thing. We're still not finished with the plaques. You should know. People have, we have a whole other board has to come up still. Everything takes time. But you want the people to say, really, you don't have to give me a plaque. And that's the attitude people should have. But at the end of the day, other people will say, but you have to have it. Right? So that's what it should always be. Not the person should say, well, how big's the plaque going to be? Then I'll tell you how much I'm going to give. Is it going to be a plaque that everybody's going to see? I'll give a little bit more. If they're not going to see so much, I don't even know if I want to give the plaque. That's not the attitude you want. So therefore, what Rabbeinu Yonah is saying, that when you are taking on new mitzvahs and you are doing tshuva things, it should be done discreetly. And he'll show you many psukim to prove this as we go on. And really, that is the best way to do things. Again, you have to know when. In front of your kids, it should not be discreet. In other words, your kids have to see this is what you do. You can't say, you're going to study Talmud clandestinely, and your kids never know you're learning Talmud. They have to see that the father learns Gemara. So there's things you got to show. But even in those areas, there's things you should cover up. And not everybody has to know all the great things that you're doing. Because when that happens, it can turn on you. And you can start thinking you're an amazing thing and I really don't have to do it. See, well, the problem is, if you're doing it for honor, so so that people will praise you. And therefore you say, see, I'm doing something I didn't have to do. Why else are they praising me? Well, then it's easy come, easy go. If they're praising me for something I didn't have to do, so one day if I decide I don't want to do it, it's not so bad either because I didn't have to do it. And then you'll stop doing it. You see, that's the trap. That's the trap in thinking you're so amazing. That's where you have to be humble and you have to say, you know what, I'm so lucky that I can do this. It's my good fortune that I can do this. I'm gaining so much by being able to do this, and I appreciate that Hashem has afforded me a lifestyle that I can do this. And I'm fortunate that I'm holding on to a raft in a sea that wants to drown me. So you can imagine if a guy's drowning in the sea. You can say, am I a wonderful guy that I grabbed onto this raft? I'd like everybody to praise me for grabbing onto this raft instead of drowning. Idiot, you. You saved your life. You don't want to save your life. You go die. You don't expect to get praise for that. So that's exactly what taking on the Torah lifestyle is. It's grabbing onto the raft. You're so I feel so lucky, so fortunate. So people don't gloat over that. If you don't think you're fortunate, you think, wow, I'm a swell guy. Okay, so I'm a swell guy, and I had enough. I don't have to do it anymore. It's like when people, let's say, volunteer. Say people volunteer for a shul. Okay. Which is not always the easiest thing to do. People have jobs, they're busy, and they want to rest. And Baruch Hashem, it's a wonderful thing, people volunteer for shul. So, and we appreciate all people who volunteer. But there are two different attitudes in people who volunteer. Right? There's the one who volunteers and says, I'm so fortunate. I'm going to give you extremes here, right? I'm so fortunate, I'm so lucky that I'm part of this kehillah. Without being part of a kehillah, I wouldn't have anything. And there's so much that I've benefited from being in this kehillah, and I continue to benefit from this kehillah. The least I could do is to volunteer a little bit. Right? And it's my privilege to volunteer. So then that person will always volunteer as long as the time is there. They'll always feel it's a privilege. You can always call on them to volunteer. Then they have the other kind of person who says, well, I think it'd be a very nice thing on my part. It'd be a wonderful gesture on my part to volunteer. And then once they see that the job is difficult, so then either they just give up volunteering in the middle, or maybe they'll see it through to the end, but then they'll say, that's it, and make sure, spell my name, it's CZ at the end, okay? Make sure that it's put in the bulletin 6 times, when I've accepted to do the job, while I'm doing the job, and after I do the job. And then I did this maybe also because next year there's a bar mitzvah coming and I need something good for the rabbi to say about me. You better remember to say that, right? And that's 100% true with people, You have that in every institution, people like that, right? Both ends and in the middle. Right. So therefore, and once they do it, they say, that's it. I'm not going to bother doing it anymore. I went beyond the call of duty. I did it once. I don't have to do it anymore. And now, Yotzei my chov, I don't ever have to volunteer again. It's the same attitude. Don't. So why am I highlighting this? Because a lot of people think they're volunteers for Hashem. They're volunteering. I'm putting on tefillin. I'm volunteering because there's so many Jews who don't. So I'll do God a favor. All these things. So if you think you're a volunteer, then one day you stop doing it. If you think because I really don't need to do it, what I need to mess up my life and give myself all these difficulties and problems, this or that. So Rabbi Yonah is saying this could be the very same thing with your mitzvah observance. And if you think you're arrogant, you become arrogant from that, then you, just as easily as you've changed your lifestyle for the good, you can change your lifestyle back the other way. And that's why he's saying you got to really be careful. So the highest level is to think, I'm not taking credit for what I've done. And therefore you'll do it clandestinely. Not everybody has to know what you're doing. You do it quietly. People don't even notice that you've done it. And that really shows a lot of tremendous sincerity over there. Yes, Rafal, you have a question?
So, okay, I think you've answered now. That he's talking about humility in taking on new levels of mitzvah observance.
Well, after you've done it. No, or any kind of tshuva. Let's say you've done terrible averos. Let's say I've done terrible averos. I eat treif. Now I'm keeping kosher. I'm a great volunteer. I'm helping Hashem out by keeping kosher.
But are you talking about humility in the tshuva process, the regret and the sorrow and the shame?
No, this is after.
This is after.
This is even after. Look what you've done already. You've regretted. You've stopped. You have concern. You have worry. You've shown it. Right? Person's, is not apt. He hasn't finished the tshuva process. Remember, it's a long process. Right. But he's already done a lot of the critical aspects. He's stopped sinning. He stopped eating treif. He's already stopped, and he regrets it, and he's worried. I'm devastated from it, and how can I continue my life? And he's been crying over it, and he's been sighing over it, and he's ashamed for what he's done. That's pretty good. That's probably more than most people have done already with this Yom Kippur fast. That person is not likely to be going back to that Avera tomorrow. Right? So this is a process. This isn't just all in one shot. It's not that I have stopped doing it for 20 years and I'm ashamed. But the person's in the process. He's humble now. He's humble because he stopped. Now that you've stopped, so now do you think? So let's say we've done 6 steps now. This could have taken a process of, let's say, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. He's regretted it. He regretted it fine. It took him another 2 weeks to stop doing it. It's almost going to take years. There's an aspect in your avodas Hashem. For example, I was just speaking to somebody, that a lady's still dealing with covering her hair. There's a lot of mitzvahs. Really, really very wonderful woman, unbelievable woman. A lot of respect for her, right? She's done a lot, keeps shouting. Everyone's doing a lot. Just like everything. Covering her hair, that's a tough one. It is. Very hard. Right? So it could be the person even regrets that they don't do that yet. And they know they should do that. They've got a couple steps, but they don't feel that bad about it yet, right? So I'm just saying it could be years in between steps. You understand? So let's say they finally cover their hair. Right? How do you know they're not going to fall back and uncover it? It's possible too, right? So one of the critical steps is that there's humility. It's to say, I'm doing it's a crazy mitzvah. I'll do God a favor. I'm a great volunteer. So one day things are going to be tough. It's too hard to volunteer this anymore. As opposed to saying, this is the most amazing thing I could do in terms of my femininity. Now I'm really a woman. Now I understand what it is to be a Jewish woman, and therefore the whole way I approach my Yiddishkeit is from a whole different perspective, because that mop that I have on my head. Right? So it's my privilege. It's a different way of looking at it. Totally different way of looking at it. You understand? So the person already has the shaitel on for 2 years. May still not have the humility for that. And that's what Rabbi Yonah is saying. You never know. It can go back. Remember, tshuva is where absolutely Hashem will testify on you. You won't go back to that avera. Right? If you don't have humility, how can we testify you're not going to go back to that avera? Right? So you understand. You understand the fall.
Yeah. What I was thinking was that there's like if someone, for example, is feeling tremendous regret over something really bad that they've done, which they would be humiliated if it was known publicly what they were doing, but they've had the regret and they have the busha.
So
but then he's saying then you have to be humble about that. Does that mean that you might be inclined to want to publicize your tshuva process?
Yes, you might want to publicize your tshuva process. Remember, we're not talking about being embarrassed. We're talking about being embarrassed. It wasn't in front of other people. It's in front of Hashem. The embarrassment was in front of Hashem and nothing with other people. You were eating treif and you were very happy with it. You had no problems with it. You're hanging around. Everybody was eating treif. What was to be ashamed about? I'm not ashamed. I'm I'm not in any religious circles, then the person realizes, this isn't right. You're ashamed in front of Hashem. That's the real shame, is to be in front of Hashem. So you feel terribly ashamed, and now you've stopped. Then that's the funny way to start. Now you can be a big Baal Gaiva. See, I'm great. I stopped. Even people who are have addictions and they stop. There's a point where they're ashamed, and then part of the support groups is they can share it with others, and then you have to be very careful that you don't become arrogant. Say, oh, see, I've it becomes a status. I was addicted. I'm not. I'm so great. This and that. That means gotta be careful, because then one day I guess I can go back to that. It's the same thing. All right, let's get yes.
But there's a part of the process where, for some people, it has to stop because there could be a virus.
What has to stop?
How far you can go with this process, because if you're dealing in a situation where you have children or a spouse that isn't cooperating with you, then you can only go so far with the process, and you have to stop, and you can't go on beyond that. All you can do is stop it. You can't do anything else.
What can I say? That's one way of looking at it. It depends on a lot of things. Person is an honest, person is an honest. But okay, we'll let it go. We'll let it go. I'm not gonna pursue this more. I'm not gonna pursue that more. I mean, it's you can't believe that Hashem never wants you to do His avodas Hashem. You can't believe Hashem never wants you to do His avodas Hashem. It's person. It's a process, but it eventually has to. At the end of the day, you've got to do what Hashem wants. Now, how long it takes to get to the end of the day, that can be up for discussion. But at the end of the day, one had better be able to change it. At the end of the day, as painful as it sounds, Hashem say, "Why didn't you do that?" At the end of the day, you can't end it off and say, because people didn't let me. It's not going to work at the end of the day. You could say it over a certain relatively temporary time. You could say, I got to do it and I will do it, but it's not yet the right time yet. That excuse can work for only so long. If the person uses it for 50 years, it's not a good excuse anymore. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying you have to do it tomorrow, but if you're going to wait 50 years, that's not going to be acceptable either. So how much in between? Obviously, the sooner the better. Obviously, the sooner the better. But what are you going to do if your children and spouse forever don't let you do it, and when you leave this world without changing, it isn't going to work. It isn't going to fly. It isn't going to fly. It's very hard. It's very hard. Hashem gives people tremendous nisyonos. It's unbelievable the nisyonos that Hashem gives people. And Hashem has to give them the strength and the courage to be able to push forward in avodas Hashem, regardless of, at the end of the day. I'm not saying a person goes about Teshuva on Monday and they divorce the spouse on Tuesday. Okay, would not recommend that. Okay, and I've always asked these shilas. I remember I asked this shilah to Rav David Cohn. I think it was 3 years ago. You were there, Rafal? I don't remember if you were with us on that one. The question and answers at the AJOB convention. What happens? One spouse wants to go further in their Yiddishkeit, the other one doesn't. So, do they recommend that the spouse should divorce the other spouse? Let's say we're talking about serious averos that are happening because of the other spouse. Serious averos. So the answer generally is no. You should not. I worded it in a specific way. The first level is, guys, one must be coming from, the other's not. So certainly don't encourage that there should be a divorce. Don't encourage it. So, because, for many reasons, because it could be the person will get divorced, and then they're going to feel so emotionally drained, they're going to regret that they did that, and they're going to hate Yiddishkeit, and they'll give up Yiddishkeit, and then things could be 10 times worse. The person needs emotional support too. The person was married to somebody, now it depends. If they never really liked their spouse, that's a different story. Then it becomes, you have to be careful that's not, religion isn't the excuse to divorce the spouse. Now he has religion to fall back. And now I'm religious. Now, let's see what a terrible person that person was. Really, you're the terrible person just as much as they are, but now you got something to fall back on. It's not a good idea either. Okay. But then you have a situation, what if, let's say after, now again, it's always after a healthy period of time. Anyone who's about Teshuva, very recent, you don't know how stable they are. They are, and how stable their Teshuva is. So that usually takes a little time. How much time? It depends on the person. But let's say after, let's say 3, 4, 5 years, the person's really strong. Okay. Now, let's say the person on their own, they decide, I cannot be an observant Jew and be married to my spouse anymore. And you've talked with the spouse and you've tried everything. It's like, not that you haven't tried, you've been loving and this and explaining and this and how important it is to you. This spouse says, really, but I'm just not interested. Then a person, if the person themselves has the strong feeling, it's a question of dveikus. It's a question of dveikus. The person says, I love Hashem so much. I can't do this to Hashem anymore. I can't do these affairs anymore. I just can't. So I had a story once with somebody not in this community. That's true. Sometimes I say it's not in the community, it is. And I'm lying. Because I have to. But sometimes it's the truth. This is the truth. Not in this community. And the person I had it with his wife. And he had been, exposed to the good parts of Yiddishkeit for quite a while. I don't remember how many years. Maybe 7, 8 years. And basically the family was keeping, and the wife really wasn't so excited about it, but the wife, was accommodating, and the house became kosher, but there's no way she was going to keep Taras HaMishpacha. Family purity, that's it, that's like, forget it. And the guy hears more and more how terrible the affair is. So eventually, what happened was, the guy was so close to Hashem, he felt that way, and you could tell, that kind of guy. He became, not intentionally, he became dysfunctional.
Yeah.
From it.
Normal.
He became dysfunctional. And he kind of said, I just can't bring myself to be with my wife. It wasn't like vengeful or anything, it was just, he couldn't. So the wife realized this, it's not an issue of me being stubborn and me. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's not like, you not want to do that, I'll show you. I'm not going to be with you. It's like he mamish couldn't, and he was already getting physically negative symptoms in that area. But he said, I can't do it anymore, and I will not. And lahavdil. Let's say that wasn't his feelings at all. But let's say a person, already in their mind makes up they want to divorce their wife. So, he just doesn't want to be with her anymore. He can't. There's no desire. So it's not like the guy wanted to divorce his wife. He loved his wife. But he loves Hashem. So he couldn't do it anymore. So then the wife understood that, and she loved him. And she said, okay, I'll start keeping family purity. It wasn't the guy said, if you don't, I'm going to divorce. It was like he said, I just can't. I can't. I love you. I'm not going to be able to bring myself. I can't even physically muster up the ability to do it because it's so hurtful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it's a unique story, and now that they're married, still happily married, and they keep it, and all things. It's all wonderful, right? So anyway, so that happens. The person takes the initiative. The person's going to say. So the question says. So if the person says he wants to divorce his wife, and he speaks to his rabbi, should the rabbi try to stop it? And this is talking after a healthy amount of time has passed. So they said, no, Rabbi, you should not stop it. So then I said, I'm going to push the envelope now. Right? See how we're going? So I say, what if the person is for sure from and all this and all these things happen? Should the rabbi, and it's a long time, should the rabbi advise the person to divorce the person? Because the person is sinning, and you should say it's about time. So because during the line of questioning, the hope was, don't push it. Eventually, the other spouse will come around. That was like kind of the feeling, give it time, and it's going to be too traumatic for the person to get divorced. So just give it time. So fine. So I said, okay, we gave it time. Lots of time. 10 years. Okay, I said, what if it's been 10 years? Should I go and tell the person, you really should divorce yours? He said, no. He said, no. You can't tell a person to divorce his wife. Okay, but then he said, but of course it isn't good that he's still married to the person. It's not like, it's wonderful and fantastic and say everything's great. In other words, you don't have to be supportive. You don't have to tell them to get divorced. But you don't have to say, that's great what you're doing and it's wonderful. We commend the fact that you're still married. Just don't say anything. So they may need counseling advice. But if they want to divorce their spouse, it has to come from themselves. So that's because why? Because if you'll be the one to go and get divorced, and they'll get divorced, and it's not going to work. It's going to be really bad. You can't. That's now there are other streams of Orthodox Judaism where they will strongly suggest you should get divorced your wife. There are those who will. But I'm saying at the HAB convention, Rav David Cohn, who's like the posek for the cure of world, right? He suggested not. But the truth of the matter is, it's understood. You can't, at the end of the day, so let's say the person, really would like to do tshuva, but, the wife doesn't want. So the person lives the next 50 years of his life not doing these mitzvahs, but always saying, I wanted to. At the end of the day, you're going to pay a price for that. You're going to pay a price for that. Because that meant you put this person before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yeah, everybody has an excuse, so this became your excuse. Other people have good excuses too. I don't have a lot of money. It's hard. I have a lifestyle that I really love that I can't change, so therefore I can't give tzedakah. There's certain people who mamish feel they can't. They can't. What do you mean? I have to live. If I don't have a vacation in the winter that costs $5,000, if I don't have a vacation in the summer that costs another $5,000, I mamish can't go on. And therefore, that $10,000, which would have been my tzedakah obligation, I just don't give it. I don't give tzedakah. No, it's not a joke. For some people, it's just as hard to give their vacations than to get a divorce from a spouse. But don't fool yourself. Some people say, I can't live without a vacation. They're serious. So your avodas Hashem has to get to the point where you have to give it up. That means you're not giving tzedakah anymore. You have to give up the vacations. You have to. But I'll die. Try it. You won't die. It's Akedah Yitzchak. Everyone has to make an Akedah. Everyone has to. No one you read the Akedah Yitzchak. Why did you read it? That's for Avram, not for me. No. Every Jew has to make an Akedah Yitzchak. A mamish an Akedah Yitzchak. Where you stand to lose everything. How else Hashem going to know you're sincere? Okay, so Hashem is reasonable. He doesn't say you became from today, you get divorced tomorrow. Hashem's the ways of Hashem are pleasant. But eventually, one can't say. Everyone says, when conditions are more favorable, then I will change. Conditions will never be more favorable. Maybe a little more favorable, but never optimal. Never optimal. So there will be a point in time where the person who's using that excuse, where there's a certain point of time where the excuse is reasonable, But then it gets to a point in time where the excuse is no longer reasonable. Who knows the answer to that? That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not for me to say. Maybe a very objective, holy person could tell you. But eventually you can't use that excuse anymore. It's got to get to the point where you got to say, because at the end of the day, where are you going to sleep forever? Where are you going to sleep forever? You're going to sleep forever with your spouse or with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And I know you want to sleep together with your spouse and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that would really be a wonderful thing. And that's why we give a person time. Hopefully they'll bring the other spouse along, and that's important. And you do everything you can to encourage that. Because you want to be together with your spouse and a son, because it's the biggest chesed you could do to your spouse is to be makar of your own spouse. It's a tremendous chesed right then and there. And you should, but you tried for 20 years already. Obviously, it ain't working. After a certain amount of time, you can say, it ain't happening. It ain't happening. So there has to be the point in time where the person has to be prepared to make that Kedas Yitzchak. And you never know what will happen. The spouse will say, you could be surprised sometimes. You say, if it really means that much to you, okay, I'll finally give in. Or a person may have to take a deep breath and say, I'm prepared to walk out the door. There has to be a point, at some point. And again, as I didn't advise, I'm not going to advise people when to do that. But it's between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You have to do it with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You have to see how long that excuse can last. So it's hard. It's very hard, and you can never judge anyone who has to go through that. And Hashem should give us the strength to be able to, if we had enough of these 20 steps, we can take those necessary steps. Okay, shkoyach.